Mandala. Welcome back to yet another episode where we dive into the principle and invitation extended by Maat. Today we are going to talk about the invitation to forgive and to become a forgiving person. This has been something that has been challenging at times for me, especially depending on the circumstances I've been in. But I've learned throughout the years that forgiving and being forgiving is not about condoning or enabling others for doing bad things, but it's about accepting the flaws that others have as much as we accept our own flaws. It's about extending the grace to others that we extend to ourselves, that we often extend or restrict to a number of people. So here Maat is telling us not to close our eyes on the evil of the world, not to pretend that we don't see what we see, not to act as enablers to people who are doing wrong, or even to facilitate the wrong, but to remain forgiving, to recognize when someone is trying to do better, when someone makes mistakes, when someone has done something wrong, but is willing to strive to do better. So there's two components to it. There is the acknowledgement that we as individuals must make when we see that something went wrong, that we see that somebody has done something wrong. Maybe somebody hurt us in the past. Maybe somebody did something that caused us harm or wronged. And it can come in all kind of shape and form. It can be in your professional career. It can be in your personal life. It can even be with somebody that you really trusted that betrayed you through a mistake. So that's the second part of it. It wasn't something that was intentional, and even if it was, there is a repentance behind it. So the first thing is acknowledging that the person did something wrong, is recognizing that the person is now repenting, or the person is striving to do better, not to repeat what has been done before us. And the third element here is to be able to extend the same grace we reserve to few people in our lives. So some of you may say, well, I've been forgiving this person over and over and this person keeps betraying me. Fine. If you keep forgiving somebody and noticing that the person is actually not willing to change the behavior, to become different, not only should you be forgiving them and being a forgiving person, but you should also remove yourself from the situation. So you shouldn't become an enabler. You shouldn't provide opportunities for this person to continue in their evil doing or in their wrongs. And I think this is sometimes where we fall. We think that because we're forgiving this person, we now have to provide resources to this person to do whatever they choose to do. Forgiving only means here that you release the expectation that you may have for that other person. Maybe you wish that your mother was a better mother, that she was more nurturing, she was more akin to your needs, that she was more supporting. Forgiving means you realize that she may not have those qualities that you're seeking. She may not live up to the extent of the standard that you've placed upon her. And that instead of having that idealized vision of her, that you accept the reality of who she is, with the good and with the bad. It doesn't mean that you will enable the bad. So if this is not a supporting person, it just means that this is not the person you will go to for that kind of support. This is also the exercise and the work that each of us has to do in terms of looking around the people that surround us, whether they are family members, they are friends, they are acquaintances, and evaluating everyone's strengths and weaknesses so that we can recognize who we can go to for what purpose, so that we are much more intentional in our interaction, so that we provide also room for others to grow and change if they wish to, but that in the meantime we recognize who they are and what the limitations are at that time. It doesn't mean that people cannot change and grow. It just means that you will base your evaluation on what they are showing you as much as what they are telling you. So it puts a responsibility on you that the forgiving act is not just something that you do on your own in your room or something, but it's also something that you put into action, you put into motion by the way you are going to be acting. And sometimes we are very harsh on certain people because of the resentment that we hold against them, because of the standards that we have built for them. It could be your own children, it could be your spouse, it could be your friend, it could be your teacher. The expectation that you have of this person is sometimes so blown up, so extravagant, that this person is never going to meet it, that this person will always fall short of that expectation. So now it is upon you to reevaluate the expectation so that that expectation reflects more of the reality of who that person is. It doesn't mean that we cannot have hopes and that we cannot wish others well to be successful and to do great. But it does mean that we have to also face reality. So, for example, if as a parent you wish and wanted your child to become a medical doctor, for example, but this child was never good in biology, was never good in science and math, was striving in the arts and languages, but not in anything else. At some point, you have to come to the reality of it and make sure you are there to support that child in their own talents and gifts so that they can find a way, a path, a profession that actually help them express who they are and the gift that they do have to provide to the world. And through that process, you will be having to forgive them for the mistakes. Maybe they didn't want to study as much because they were not really interested in those areas, science and biology. And the frustration may come because if you see that you are better in other areas or the other areas that you want to focus on and less on the one that you're bad at. So some parents may hold resentment against their children because of the professional path that they have chosen, seeing them as lazy, instead of understanding sometimes that that path was not meant for them, and that at some point that child becomes an adult that is, who can make their own choices and leave the consequences of them. So it is the same thing. We may have expectation for our spouse to be a certain way, even though she's shown us that they don't have those qualities. So there's always time when you are forgiving is also not just evaluating the other person, but it's also evaluating yourself in terms of how do you develop the standards that are not aligned with reality, that are not aligned with who this person truly is, with the situation truly is. Because sometimes it can be a situation that we have to forgive. So it pushes you to examine why do you have such high standards, where do they come from? It may be something that you've seen, so you want to emulate. You've seen a relationship that was portrayed a certain way to you, and you want to emulate that in your own relationship, disregarding who your partner truly is. Same, you can have seen other people talking about their children and their accomplishments, and now you want to push the same accomplishment onto your children, regardless of who they are. So you see, as much as forgiving is about the wrong that the other person did to you, it's also about how you yourself put you in a position where you're going to be let down. Put you in a position where you are building a world that is only meant to crumble. Because a world that is not based on the reality that you're experiencing, that is 100% based on the fantasy, your wish and hopes, is something that's going to crumble at some point when reality really sinks in. So of course, as I mentioned, having hopes, having aspiration is not a negative thing, and it's sometimes a good thing to have, so long as those hope and aspiration are tied to the reality of what is going on, are tied to the aspiration of the person that's being involved, are tied to the reality of the situation or the circumstances that you are in, so that you can try to elevate yourself from point 1 to point B. You can try to help elevate somebody else who wants to go from point A to point B. But you cannot force those elements, and you cannot force somebody who doesn't want to go, who doesn't want to change, who doesn't want to do it. The same way, you will not want somebody to force you to go or to become someone you don't want to. So there's a lot here to kind of process and to kind of sit with. I've seen and I've heard many, oftentimes women, have stories of hurt and pain, have expressed how forgiving is so hard for them, how every time they think of a situation or a specific person, they are taken straight back to the moment where they were hurt or harmed, and that they are having a hard time forgiving or moving on. What Maat is asking us to look at sometimes to find inspiration, because we all have the strength and the will to forgive. Forgive is something that we have within us. It's something the same way that we have the power and the willingness to grant love, to give love, to share love, as much love as we desire to share. Well, it's the same for forgiveness. We have the power and we have the ability to forgive as many times, as many people as we wish to extend the forgiveness to. And the similar to love, forgiving does not mean enabling, does not mean being a pushover, does not mean being enabling bad circumstances or bad behaviors. It simply means realigning your perception with the reality of things, having more rational or having more realistic expectation from others. And it also does not negate having hopes and aspiration and wanting others to do better, to become greater and better as well. We can still have this aspiration and have standards and expectation that correlates better with the reality of things. And sometimes it requires us to let go of the vision that we had for somebody else, or for a situation, or for a relationship. It pushes us to let go of the fantasy we may have built in our head, in our heart, in our space, for a reality that does not exist and that may never come to life. So there is sometimes a bit of a grieving process. Forgiveness sometimes may feel very painful towards the person that's forgiving, because you have to let go of the image, of the vision, the aspiration that you had for a particular person, for themselves, or for a situation that you went through. But it also means that after that process, at the end of that process, you will be free and liberated. You won't have to keep tabs on the aspiration that you may have on someone else. You don't want to have to keep tabs and on building and depending and expending so much energy for this aspirational vision that you may have of something that is not, or something that may never come to be. And like, as I mentioned, this is very different from having aspiration that somebody comes to you and shares one of their dreams with you, and you support them in that dream. You are there to nurture them in that dream, in that position, throughout their failures, throughout their second tries, the tribulations, etc., etc. So that's very different energy also, and state of mind when you are supporting someone else's dream for themselves versus you supporting your dream that you have for that person and pushing that dream onto them, which also requires a lot of energy. So at the end of that forgiving process, you are able to see things a lot more clearly, and you are able to place that energy that you were expending in something that was never going to be, to put it somewhere that would be much more useful for you, for that person, or for that situation. And to go back to my example that I was talking about with women in particular, we can apply this to women, but it also works for some men and for some other situation. So when we feel like forgiveness is something that's very hard to do, that we feel that sometimes may not be attainable because of the pain and the hurt that we're still feeling at the moment, or because of how egregious the situation was, we may turn to look for inspiration for forgiveness. We may turn to look for either past experiences, situations, people around us that aspire us to forgive. So we may think about our good friend who can do no wrong, and think about how many times that good friend has betrayed you or has done wrong to you, and yet you extended so much grace to that person. You extended so much love to that person, time and time and time again. Now, Maat is basically just calling you to say all of that grace that you may have for this person, extended to others. All of the grace that you may have for your children when they do wrong, extend it to other people. If you can recognize that your child can make a mistake, however significant that is, you can also recognize that this other person, by hurting you, also made a mistake or wrong, and extend the same grace to them. And I know this may require you to go and search within your soul, search within yourself, the strength to be able to consider sometimes, just not even do it, but just consider extending that grace. Because it would mean that you are not categorizing people. You don't play favorites. You try to be fair. And I think this is the essence of Maat. Maat often pushes us to strive to be able to extend a fair treatment to all that surrounds us, whether other people or situation, to be fair in how we behave. You understand that there may be controversies, or there may be intricacies, or there may be paradoxes when you constantly extend grace to your friends, but none to your partner. You expect your partner to be perfect, but you recognize that your friends are not. So the same grace that you offer to your friend should be extended to your partner. You should also be recognizing that your partner isn't perfect, just like your friends. You should be able to recognize that sometimes you have to extend that grace to your partner. And that may be an exercise for yourself to just look at where do you extend grace within your experience. You may be extending grace if you don't have friends, if you don't have coworkers or family members that you favor and that can do no wrong at your eyes. For you, it may be your pets. Your pets pee on the carpet, yet you understand that this dog maybe not be trained well, maybe needs to be trained better. Maybe he was just angry and was doing this in retaliation towards you. Maybe he was trying to communicate to you that he was angry at you, mad at you, for whatever reason. Yet, you don't put your dog or your pet out. You recognize the limitation, and you accept the limitation, and you deal with it. Then that it is of the same grace we are talking about. When you're looking at another individual that may have done you wrong, that may have done something wrong, that may not have lived up to your expectation, that's an opportunity to you to recognize the limitation. That's an opportunity to you to extend the same grace. And lastly also, it may be an opportunity to you to extend that grace to yourself. So many are oftentimes very harsh toward others in how you judge others and how you treat others because you're naturally harsh to yourself. So you basically extend the assessment that you use for your own self, you apply to other people. And so you will judge certain people based on how you judge yourself, not based on the reality of the significance or insignificance of what they've done or of the situation. And that means also that as you start to recognize that people have flaws, people around you have flaws, you will never find someone who's perfect. People will always come short because no one is perfect. Even those who are extending, trying to work on themselves and becoming better day after day, they still have certain flaws. They are still a work in progress. Therefore, they will still need some grace and some forgiveness to be done. And I think when you go through circumstances or situation where grace is extended to you, and that you've gone through the feeling that how you can feel misunderstood, how you can feel pushed aside, pushed apart, or devalued when you did something wrong, and to just have somebody say, I recognize that you've done wrong, and I forgive you, and I hope and I wish that you do better in the future. The energy that comes with that, the healing energy that comes with that comes to help propel you, that comes to help motivate you to do better, is probably one of the strongest and most beautiful forces that you may experience in your life. And oftentimes that forces is mixed with love, because somebody who extends grace to you is simply extending love to you. And if you recognize that, and you recognize how that made you feel to just have been at least once in a while, once in that moment been understood, felt to be understood, felt to be accepted despite your flaws, even though you still have work to do, because don't get it twisted and get it wrong. It's not because somebody's forgiving you that you don't have work to do on yourself to become better. It's only the acknowledgement of your limitation at that moment or in that situation. And the forgiveness usually comes with a requirement that you aim to do better. You aim to strive and become better. Right? So you're not using forgiveness or asking forgiveness so you can repeat the same mistakes, repeat the same errors. It devalues the forgiveness, and oftentimes it restricts it, and sometimes even contribute to make it disappear. People are willing to forgive you for one mistake one time, maybe twice, but hardly 3 times. So that's why it's important that when somebody extends their forgiveness to you, that you understand the gravity of things, that you understand that for that person to feel that much hurt was that because that person may have held you in a high regard. In higher regard, maybe that you held your own self. And that should be an opportunity for you to look at yourself, to look at what you're doing, and to reassess whether this is really truly the person you want to be. So every time there is a forgiving process going on, there's the act of forgiving, and there's the act of receiving that forgiveness. And it is when we receive the forgiveness that we can also heal. So healing is both for the person who's giving the forgiveness, because they heal themselves, they realign their perception with reality. They take note and account of the limitations that others have, and they themselves will work on having more realistic expectation of others and accepting others that others have limitations and flaws. On the receiving end, the people who are receiving the forgiveness, they themselves have to realign themselves and their expectations of who they are and who they want to become. They also have to strive to not to repeat the same mistake, to atone and restitute and repair for the mistake that they've committed, the wrong, doing the harm that they've done and caused, and of course, to strive not to repeat that harm to themselves or to no one else, or to repeat the same situation. So it is a process that requires give and take. It is a process that is very loving, that has to be done in the midst of love, because we cannot forgive out of anger. We cannot forgive out of spite. These are things that will be just superficial. It wouldn't go through a truly healing process or healing calling. So when Maat is inviting us to forgive, for each of us, it may call, or it may represent, or it may evoke different situations and different circumstances, or even different people. So that's kind of like a circumstance and invitation that you ask, where in your life have you not forgiven someone? Have you not forgiven a situation? Or have you not forgiven yourself? It invites you to look at this different situation, seek the strength to forgive and heal the situation through, first of all, recognizing what the situation was, recognizing the circumstances of the situation of the person, their limitations, their flaws, recognizing also that you do have limitations, you do have flaws, and that the important is also how you interact and recognize those flaws and deal with them. And healing all of this through extending the forgiveness by realigning your own perception of yourself, your own expectation of others and that situation with the reality of how it truly was. And as you go through that process, please take the time to extend grace to yourself. We're living in a very hard, tumultuous time. A lot of you have gone through a lot, and be gracious with yourself because this healing process may take a little bit of time. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. Healing process is not something that you rush. It's something that you, on the contrary, have to take time, bits by bits, to be able to fully clean and heal the circumstances and the people also you may have hurt. So sometimes your forgiveness can also be a true healing energy to someone else, especially when the person has been seeking and asking for their forgiveness for a long time. And in return, of course, as what we extend, what we send out to the world is actually what we will receive and what comes back to us. So as we are able to have realistic expectation of others, as we are able to recognize the limitation and the flaws of others and extend grace to them, then others will also do the same towards us. We can never expect to receive more than we are willing to give.